Hey, Freddie here. We're just having a quick look at the high modulus power carbon masts from Axis. These have been out for a little while now, but they were a bit of a game changer when they came out, and just want to clear up if anyone is maybe thinking about where to go next and if this is going to be the next choice for your setup. This is the carbon mast option from Axis now. It's not the cheapest upgrade to your setup, but there can be massive benefits by going to something like this. The kind of guys and girls that are going to be riding these are really going to be pushing the envelope of high performance riding, or you're going to be on the larger end size-wise. The way they've come about is Axis have been really good at producing high span wings for a long time, so really quite long wings. And during the evolution of the arts, which were reduced chord, quite thin, hugely high aspect ratio, large span wings, they were just getting these massive leverage forces on the entire foil setup. Lots of bend and lots of flex. Now Axis have had the strongest, or one of the strongest, I would say the strongest aluminium masts on the market for a long time. We don't get issues with bend and flex too much, but as soon as you start going to these bigger spans, or if you are above 80, 90 kilos, you're starting to put a lot of flex through the whole system. And you can lose some of the benefits of going towards those higher performance wings. You know, you've got all this speed and all this glide, but if you can't actually bank over and generate a hard carve because your mast system or whatever it might be is flexing, you're not getting the most out of it. And that's where, although they do well on the aluminiums, as soon as you start getting to the higher end of performance, something like this is going to benefit massively. High modulus is a slight difference in the carbon fibre that they're using. It's been heat treated, and it's essentially well known to be a hell of a lot stiffer than your standard carbon fibre. Okay, so the whole system is stiffer, and there's then a few other benefits as well. In an ideal world, we would all use one monocoque structure, i.e. the foil, the mast, the fuselage is all one piece, so it doesn't really make sense in real terms for transportation and things. But when it comes to the mast, we can minimise and take away two of the big turning points or the moving points within the foil system. So the fuselage doodad connection, again, we try and make it as snug as possible, but there's always going to be the tiniest bit of movement. Likewise with the base plate and the mast connection. By removing those, you're making this whole thing a hell of a lot stiffer, which is going to enable you to put more feeling and pressure down through the board, through the mast, down into the foil, which is where you want it to actually respond to. So by removing those, it's going to act faster and quicker, essentially. We then, because we're not just using an extruded piece of aluminium, which is what the masts are, they come out of production in 4, 5, 6 metre lengths and then chopped down into the increments, so they're all exactly the same. Because these are individual items, you can reduce the chord and taper it downwards. So we get a lot more strength up at the top of the base plate in the mast, which is where all the pivoting forces and twisting forces generally come from. So beefing that up makes it stronger and less likely to break at all. And then we slim it down to where we need the speed and where we don't need the strength quite as much, towards where the fuselage connection is. So with the overall chord, we go from quite wide up at the top down to a little bit thinner towards the bottom. And likewise, thickness wise, we have a much thicker piece here than we do down the bottom, which is essentially going to speed up the mast because we're reducing drag. So as soon as you get up onto the foil and you're higher in the water, there's much less drag going on down here than there is up here, so you can essentially be faster. And that, the thicknesses of the chord and the whole profile are thinner than that of the aluminium masts in the range as well. So speed should improve over that. Comes in a nice bag. Big benefit, comes with the screws that you need for the carbon masts as well. Comes in a range of sizes. So again, we see, I think I've got the 75 here, the 750, there's an 820, a 900 and a 1020. Bulk of sales and interest has generally been in the 820 and the 900, depending on what people want to be doing with their masts. The 75 is fairly understood that it's going to be a dock start or a surf foil wing, mast, sorry. Because that's generally around the size you kind of want for the depth of water and for a few other things that we can get into on another video. 820 and 900 seem to be better for a lot of choppier conditions. 820 is a good crossover between the 75 and the 90. 90 is what the majority of guys are winging on nowadays. Gives you a lot more ability to ride through bigger chop, essentially. That's probably one of the major points for me. When you're riding out back through chop, you're not having to correct your pitch quite as much as you would do on a smaller mast. That's kind of the benefit of the bigger masts. Hopefully I've ticked everything off there. The main use of these is going to be for, like I said, just to reiterate, bigger guys, and then anyone that's pushing the boundaries a little bit more. So if you are sub 75 kilos, if you're in the 60s, you're probably not going to gain quite as much of a benefit out of these as the bigger guys are. However, if you're starting to really throw shapes in the waves and you're really starting to bank over your turns, you've just got to think about the amount of pressure that you're going to be putting through that foil setup. That's where these are going to really come into their own, and these are going to improve your existing foil setup with whatever you're doing. Likewise, if you're bigger chap, these are going to be a real go-to, especially if you're riding some of those bigger wings. You've just got to think of the leverage forces as soon as you get to the likes of the 1310, the 1300, 1150, or even the bigger arts. There's a hell of a lot more going on there leverage-wise, and if you can reduce some of that, you'll get a hell of a lot more performance out of your wings. That's the Power Carbon Masts in high modulus. Any more questions? Give us a shout.